wildfires was not something I ever thought about. As I said, we've been in Montana. My husband's from Montana, and we moved to Montana together about 28 years ago. And it just wasn't in my awareness.
We've had trouble for years, obviously. 1988 was pretty famous for the wildfires that year. It was a very hot summer. And of course, that's when the major fires occurred in Yellowstone Park. Since then, there's been many others. But last summer, we personally really felt the effects of the wildfire smoke coming from the West Coast. And I specifically remember it because my birthday happens to fall around Labor Day weekend. And of course, it was COVID and life was upended anyway. But my husband said, well, let's go out. You know, there's an out restaurant that has nice outdoor seating. Well, the day we were going to go, literally, you could see the air you were breathing. It was so bad. Our eyes were burning. I've never had this happen before, but literally my chest felt heavy.
I've lived in Montana since 1988, since the Yellowstone fire. And I just read an article recently about how we were all just shocked and amazed by how big the Yellowstone fire was. I mean, when I moved to Montana, I flew over it and I saw it from the air. So I know how big it was. And, you know, that's a relatively small fire. That's a relatively modest fire, you know, compared to what's happened. You know, in 2000, we had incredible fires.
Right now we have smoky skies, although the air quality this morning was moderate, so I could open up my house and at least let some of the cool air in. But we've had multiple days already where at night we have to keep everything closed up. We can't, you know, we have a 7-year-old, she's vulnerable, but we can't open the windows and let the air in. And that means the house is warmer the next day. Now we have a basement, so we have a cool spot we can go to. Not everybody has that. But I'm checking air quality constantly when there's smoke in the air just to make sure that we're making good choices for our child.
So we've had days when I can look out my window and it's a fabulous view of the valley. And it's not very big, but some days I can't see across it. That's how much smoke we have. So we're doing research in terms of our industrial hygienists, looking at contaminant levels, concentrations, and then some of the low-tech solutions. Things have changed. We used to have a local ski slope, and you can see where the runs were on the hill very close, so that it no longer gets snow.
Just watching the landscape change around me, areas that I've hiked in my whole life that are either now burnt or dried up. There's a lot of like waterfalls I used to go to that don't flow anymore. And it's just these sort of constant reminders of this is happening, this is happening.
It's definitely that experience of solastalgia where you, I guess one of the things that I'm feeling kind of acutely right now is that what used to be for me coming into a Montana summer, this kind of hooray, Montana summer, you know, this is going to be so great every year, is kind of filled with this baseline dread or anticipation of when are the wildfires going to hit and how is that going to, you know, not only impact my ability to get outdoors and, you know, and everything, which is such a kind of a lifeline for me from a mental health and just kind of like fitness overall. Life outlook that's very important to me, but also kind of having that underlying anxiety about safety of people that I care about too, or just people in general, but having that prior experience.
To me, the smell of smoke is always like, it's sort of like a deja vu moment of it means like the end of summer and school starting next week idea. So I always have this sort of like visceral reaction of, oh, it must be end of August when I smell it. And right now we have our kind of thickest smoke we ever get, and it's beginning of July. And I think that's just like a really like, that's a moment where I just sort of had the sinking feeling in my stomach the other day of this is so abnormal and so new just in, you know, I'm not 30 yet. And in my lifetime, you know, I've seen that change dramatically.
I remember we came back from a holiday one time and like, there was literally like the next day we got back, there was like, you could see the flames like coming over the trees. Like it's the fire threat every summer is just unbearable. And my parents are getting older. They can't like always try to manage everything like during the fire season, because it's a large portion of property. Like you have to cut all the grass, you have to manage land, and there's a lot of people who live in the neighborhood who don't understand that you need to have that as a priority, because when the fire season comes, it's like no joke.
I can very easily see the link between climate change causes trauma. If you lose your home, or you almost lose your home. My brother lives in Santa Rosa, California, and the past 2 summers he has almost lost his home. So that chronic stress is very detrimental to human health. And there's a lot of us now living with the chronic stress of going through a summer of wildfires like we did last summer. You can't go outside, it's gray all the time. That is very bad for mental health and well-being.
And I have to say, after this year with COVID, and now then having, the immense heat wave, and we were just on the edge of that heat wave, really, of that heat dome. We didn't even, it's been hot, but we didn't get it like Seattle and Portland. It's been brutal to have those hot days one after another. And we're not dipping below 88 or 90 for the foreseeable future. And then have the smoke roll in where it's like, we can't go outside, we can't open our windows, it's hot. It's the beginning of July. This is like our glorious time in Montana, and that's being taken away. And that feels really hard, especially with a little kid. It makes me a little, it's just really hard. And I have a ton of privilege. I have options, and some families have a lot less.
So people are really understanding that, and understanding that the environmental issues that we're up against are health issues. So that's a change, that's a change in the past, 10 years, maybe even 5 years. And I think along the West Coast, that has been driven home by the fires over the past 5 or 6 years. This summer by the heat, by the reality that we live with smoke, most of the summer now. This is a big deal. So looking at how we make some of these decisions using an environmental justice lens is important.
What I always remind people is, climate change, it's not a light switch. It's not like all of a sudden, everything's good, and then all of a sudden now we have climate change. So, what we're seeing is variability in weather and climate around a slow upward trend in temperatures. And when you start rolling the dice, you start seeing these extreme events come up more and more often. And it's really challenging. It's scary as I look at my daughter and I think, well, what do I need to do now so that she has, so that she's well protected?
Air pollution and climate change affects all of us equally. More vulnerable populations more now, but will eventually affect everyone. And it's not something that's up to an individual leader, a person, a state, a nation to solve. It's going to take all of us. And health is one thing that we all a lot of us take for granted, but at the same time, we are also very aware of, especially when it comes to our children and family members.
We have prioritized a couple things. One being that our environmental crisis and our climate crisis is a health crisis. There's that is a very good reason to be concerned. It's not the only reason. We could be concerned about future livability, about other species, about justice, but it's also a big health crisis. So we know that it makes for worse outcomes related to heart, lung, kidney, skin, mental health, in a variety of ways. And that's impacting Montana, even though we're in the north. You'd think we might be spared for a while, but we're not, because of the drought and the heat and different vectors. So I think the health message is really important about climate change and our environmental crisis, because it's too often politicized, but everybody cares about their health. Everybody wants to be healthy and they want their kids to be healthy, and that's not very controversial.